Sheriff Marcus Rodriguez's perception of what lay in the vast emptiness of the Texas desert would be forever altered when the emergency call came through at 3:17 a.m. on a sweltering August night. Rodriguez believed he had seen every kind of evil the borderlands could produce during his 22 years as a law enforcement officer in Brewster County, including drug wars that turned the desert into a battlefield, human trafficking, and cartel violence. However, nothing had prepared him for what was waiting for him at the deserted Blackstone Ranch. Deputy Sarah Chen said, "Sheriff, we've got multiple fatalities at the old Blackstone property." Barely audible over a lot of static. During a routine sweep, Border Patrol discovered the scene. "I've never seen anything like this, sir." When the call came in, Rodriguez was in his office going over cartel intelligence reports. Since the owner vanished during a particularly violent time of cross-border smuggling, the Blackstone Ranch had been abandoned for 15 years. The property was only reachable by dirt roads that wound through prickly pear and mesquite cacti, and it was located 30 miles from the closest paved road. "How many bodies, Chen?" Her voice trailed off, and Rodriguez heard the wind blowing across the desert. "7 confirmed, but Sheriff," she said, "they're not recently killed." "Some of these bodies have been here for months, possibly years," said Agent Martinez of the Border Patrol. "However, they are somehow preserved and made arrangements." "Arranged how?" "In a circle around what looks like an altar, made from rocks and other materials. Sir, I think we're dealing with some kind of ritual killing." Rodriguez grabbed his keys and weapon, his mind already cycling through possibilities. Cartel executions sometimes involved ritualistic elements, psychological warfare designed to terrorize rivals. But this far from established smuggling routes, it was more likely to be the work of a serial killer who'd found the perfect dumping ground. The drive to Blackstone Ranch took 90 minutes through terrain that grew increasingly desolate with each mile. Rodriguez's headlights swept across endless expanses of creosote bush and ocotillo, occasionally illuminating the reflective eyes of javelinas or coyotes. The desert at night was a different world, full of sounds that city dwellers never heard, and dangers they couldn't imagine. As he approached the ranch property, Rodriguez counted 6 vehicles: Chen's patrol car, 2 Border Patrol units, a crime scene van, and 2 unmarked sedans that suggested federal involvement. Floodlights had been set up around what had once been the ranch house, casting harsh shadows across the desert landscape. Chen met him at the perimeter tape, her usually composed demeanor shaken. "Sheriff, Agent Martinez from Border Patrol is coordinating with someone from the FBI. They've been here for 2 hours already." "FBI? This fast?" "That's what I thought." Apparently, this scene matches others they've been tracking across the Southwest. Agent Foster from the Texas Rangers is also en route. Rodriguez ducked under the tape and approached the ranch house. The structure was a typical Texas limestone building, built in the 1940s when cattle ranching was still profitable in this harsh landscape. But as he got closer, he could see why Chen had been disturbed. The 7 bodies were indeed arranged in a perfect circle in what had once been the ranch's courtyard. But these weren't recent victims. The preservation Chen had mentioned was immediately apparent. Despite the desert heat that should have reduced them to bones and dust, the bodies appeared mummified, their skin leathery but intact. "Jesus," Rodriguez muttered, playing his flashlight across the scene. Agent Paul Martinez from Border Patrol approached, his weathered face grim. "Sheriff Rodriguez? I've been working this desert for 12 years, seen plenty of cartel handiwork. This isn't that." "What makes you say that?" Martinez gestured toward the arrangement. "Cartels kill to send messages. Fear, territory, revenge, this is something else. Look at the positioning, the care taken with placement, and the preservation. I've never seen anything like it. Dr. Robert Mitchell, the county medical examiner, emerged from examining one of the bodies. His usual clinical detachment had been replaced by barely concealed unease. "Sheriff, preliminary examination suggests these individuals died at different times over a period of several years, but the preservation is unnatural. No embalming chemicals, no environmental factors that would explain this level of mummification. Cause of death? That's where it gets disturbing. No obvious trauma, no signs of violence. It's as if they simply stopped living. But there's something else." Mitchell led Rodriguez to the center of the circle, where an arrangement of stones and other objects had been carefully constructed. "This isn't random," Mitchell explained. "The stone arrangement follows specific geometric patterns. And these other materials," he indicated what looked like organic matter woven between the rocks. "I can't identify them. They're not from any plant or animal species I recognize." Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI joined their discussion. She was younger than Rodriguez had expected, but her bearing suggested extensive experience with unusual cases. "Sheriff Rodriguez, I've been tracking similar scenes across Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona for the past 18 months. 7 locations, all with the same characteristics: multiple victims, circular arrangements, unexplained preservation. You think we're dealing with a serial killer?" Serial killers typically follow patterns driven by psychological compulsion. This suggests something more systematic. The geographic distribution, the timing, the ritualistic elements, it's more like a coordinated operation. Rodriguez studied the crime scene more carefully. The desert floor around the circle showed signs of recent activity. Footprints, vehicle tracks, disturbed vegetation. But there were also older signs, patterns worn into the earth that suggested this location had been used repeatedly over time. "Agent Walsh, what connects the other scenes to this one?" "All located in remote desert areas, all near abandoned structures. And in each case, we found evidence that the victims came willingly. No signs of struggle, no restraints, no indication they were brought there against their will." Deputy Chen approached with a metal detector and evidence bags. "Sheriff, we found something buried near the ranch house foundation." "You need to see this." She led them to a spot 20 feet from the circle where she'd uncovered a metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox, buried 2 feet deep. The box was made of an unusual alloy that showed no signs of corrosion despite years in the ground. "Any markings?" Rodriguez asked. "Just these symbols." Chen indicated geometric patterns etched into the metal surface. "They don't match any language or alphabet in our database." Walsh examined the box carefully. "This is consistent with the other scenes. We've found similar containers at 4 of the 7 locations. They appear to contain organic material, but our labs haven't been able to identify the contents." "Can we open it?" "I'd prefer to wait for specialized equipment. The contents of the other boxes reacted badly to exposure to air." Rodriguez's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Sheriff, this is dispatch. We've got reports of missing persons that might be related to your scene. 3 individuals reported missing from Marathon over the past week. Marathon was the nearest town to Blackstone Ranch, population 428, a small community that served as a supply point for ranchers and border patrol operations. 3 missing persons from such a small community was unprecedented." "Send me the details," Rodriguez responded. Within minutes, Chen's tablet displayed the missing persons reports. Dr. Amanda Torres, 34, an archaeologist from UT Austin who'd been researching Native American sites in the area. Michael Chen, 41, a geologist conducting mineral surveys for a mining company. Lisa Rodriguez, 28, a freelance journalist writing about border security issues. All three were highly educated professionals, Walsh observed. That fits the pattern from other scenes. The victims aren't random. They're selected based on specific criteria. Rodriguez studied the reports more carefully. All three had been staying at the same motel in Marathon. All had mentioned plans to explore the desert, and all had disappeared within the same 72-hour window. They knew each other, he realized. Or at least they were brought together somehow. Agent Foster from the Texas Rangers arrived as the sun began to rise over the desert. He was a tall, lean man with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades working the Texas borderlands. His reputation preceded him. 15 years with the Rangers, specializing in cases that defied conventional explanation. "Rodriguez," Foster said, shaking hands firmly. "I've read the preliminary reports. This is the 8th scene we've documented with these characteristics." "8th?" Agent Walsh said, 7. "The 8th was discovered yesterday in Arizona." Similar arrangement, similar preservation, but this time we had witnesses, hikers who saw the ritual taking place. Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken. Live witnesses? Traumatized, confused, but alive. According to their statements, they observed approximately 20 individuals conducting some kind of ceremony around the circle. The participants appeared to be in various states of consciousness, some alert and active, others seemingly entranced. Did they get descriptions? Foster pulled out a tablet displaying sketches based on witness testimony. "This is where it gets strange, Sheriff." The witnesses described the participants as appearing normal during daylight, but as darkness fell, they began to change. Change how? Elongated limbs, altered facial features, movements that weren't quite human. The witnesses thought they were hallucinating, possibly from dehydration or heat exposure, but both gave consistent accounts. Dr. Mitchell had been listening intently. That might explain the preservation. If we're dealing with individuals who've undergone some kind of biological transformation... "Doctor, what are you suggesting?" Rodriguez asked. "I'm not sure. But the tissue samples I've collected show cellular structures I've never seen before, almost as if the normal decomposition process has been interrupted." The investigation team spent the morning processing the scene, but each piece of evidence raised more questions than it answered. The footprints around the circle showed a disturbing pattern. They appeared human at first glance, but closer examination revealed subtle differences in size and shape. "Sheriff," Chen called from near the ranch house ruins. "You need to see this." She'd found a journal, wrapped in plastic and hidden in what had once been a kitchen cabinet. The pages were filled with handwritten entries dating back 3 years, documenting encounters with what the author called the transformed. Rodriguez read aloud from the first entry. Day 1. The voices started during the new moon. Not audible voices, but something that speaks directly to consciousness. They promise knowledge, evolution, transcendence beyond human limitations. Foster leaned over Rodriguez's shoulder. "That handwriting looks familiar. Let me check something." He compared the journal to one of the missing persons reports. "Sheriff, this journal was written by Sarah Blackstone, the original ranch owner who disappeared 15 years ago." "That's impossible. The dates in this journal are recent, unless she's been living here all this time, documenting whatever's been happening." The journal entries grew progressively more disturbing as they continued reading. Sarah described meeting other individuals who'd been called to the ranch, watching them undergo gradual physical and mental changes, and eventually participating in ceremonies that she claimed could grant immortality at the cost of humanity. Day 247. The transformation is nearly complete. I can feel my consciousness expanding beyond the limitations of single existence. Soon I'll join the others in the deep desert, where reality follows different rules. Walsh studied the journal carefully. If this is genuine, it suggests we're not dealing with a traditional serial killer or cult. We're looking at some kind of ongoing transformation process that's been attracting victims for over a decade. Rodriguez's radio interrupted their discussion. "Sheriff, we've got a situation." 3 individuals walking toward your location from the east. They match the descriptions of the missing persons from Marathon. Everyone at the scene drew their weapons and took defensive positions. Through binoculars, Rodriguez could see 3 figures approaching across the desert, walking in perfect single file despite the rough terrain. "They're not acting like people in distress," Chen observed. "No urgency, no apparent awareness of their surroundings." As the figures got closer, Rodriguez could confirm their identities: Dr. Torres, Michael Chen, and Lisa Rodriguez. But something was wrong with their appearance. They moved with an unnatural grace. Their skin seemed to shimmer in the desert heat, and their eyes reflected sunlight like mirrors. "Dr. Torres!" Rodriguez called through a bullhorn. "This is Sheriff Rodriguez. I need you to stop and identify yourselves." The 3 figures halted but didn't respond verbally. Instead, they began moving in a synchronized, dance-like pattern, their movements flowing together as if controlled by a single consciousness. Agent Foster had seen enough. "Everyone fall back to the vehicles. Now." But as they retreated, the 3 figures suddenly vanished. Not gradually, not by hiding behind cover, but simply disappeared as if they'd never been there. "Did everyone see that?" Walsh asked, her professional composure finally cracking. Before anyone could respond, their radios erupted with transmissions from multiple sources: dispatch, border patrol, other sheriff's departments. Reports were flooding in from across the region of missing persons, unusual sightings, and what witnesses described as people who weren't quite people anymore. Rodriguez realized they weren't dealing with an isolated incident. Whatever was happening at Blackstone Ranch was part of something much larger, something that was spreading across the desert southwest. The emergency task force convened at the Brewster County Sheriff's Department 6 hours after the Blackstone Ranch incident, bringing together representatives from agencies that rarely collaborated on routine cases. Sheriff Rodriguez found himself at the center of something that had escalated far beyond local law enforcement capabilities. Agent Walsh had established a command center in the department's main conference room, with maps, photographs, and evidence displays covering every available surface. The scope of what they were dealing with became clear as she presented her findings to the assembled team. "We now have confirmed incidents at 9 locations across a 400-mile stretch of the Texas-Mexico border," Walsh announced, pointing to red markers on a large map. "The timeline suggests acceleration." The first documented case was 18 months ago. In the past 3 months, we've had 6 incidents. Detective Bill Hayes from the state's Criminal Investigation Unit studied the pattern. That's not random distribution. These locations follow specific geographical features, all near underground water sources, all at elevations between 2,800 and 3,200 feet. Agent Foster added his perspective from the Rangers. "We've also identified communication patterns." In each case, the missing persons had recent contact with individuals who'd been reported missing from previous incidents. It's like a recruitment network. Rodriguez examined the evidence boards more closely. Each incident followed the same basic pattern. Educated professionals drawn to remote desert locations, mysterious disappearances, and later discovery of preserved bodies arranged in ritualistic circles. But there were variations that suggested evolution in whatever process was responsible. "The preservation methods are becoming more sophisticated," Dr. Mitchell reported. "Early cases show basic mummification. Recent cases show something approaching suspended animation. The latest victims from Arizona were found with measurable brain activity despite being technically dead. Deputy Chen had been analyzing digital evidence from the victims' devices. "Sheriff, I found something disturbing." All of the recent victims had been visiting the same website, Desert Enlightenment. It presents itself as a spiritual retreat organization, but the content is unusual. She projected the website onto the main screen. At first glance, it looked like a typical New Age spiritual site. Promises of transformation, connection with ancient wisdom, escape from modern society's limitations. But as Chen scrolled through the content, subliminal patterns became apparent. "The text contains hidden instructions," Chen explained. "Embedded coordinates, timing suggestions, and what appear to be psychological triggers. Anyone spending significant time on this site would be exposed to sophisticated manipulation techniques." Agent Walsh cross-referenced the website data with their victim profiles. Every missing person accessed this site multiple times in the weeks before their disappearance. But here's what's really concerning. The site's registration traces back to a server farm that officially doesn't exist. "Government black site?" Hayes suggested. "Worse. The digital signature suggests quantum computing capabilities that are at least a decade ahead of anything we know exists." Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "You're saying we're dealing with technology that shouldn't exist?" "I'm saying whoever is behind this has resources that go beyond conventional criminal organizations or even most government agencies." The briefing was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Border Patrol. Agent Martinez's voice carried barely controlled panic. "All units, we have a mass casualty event at the Terlingua ghost town." Multiple individuals found in various states of, I don't know how to describe this. "We need medical teams and hazmat units immediately." Rodriguez knew Terlingua well. A former mining town that had been abandoned in the 1940s, but had recently become a tourist destination for its authentic Wild West atmosphere. During peak season, it hosted several hundred visitors on any given day. The drive to Terlingua took 40 minutes through increasingly bizarre landscape. As they approached the town, they could see emergency vehicles from multiple agencies creating a perimeter around the historic buildings. But something was wrong with the scene. Too many vehicles. Too much activity for a typical emergency response. Captain Linda Thompson met them at the command post that had been hastily established in the town's former general store. Her usually calm demeanor showed cracks of barely controlled stress. "Sheriff, we have 43 individuals who were found this morning in various locations throughout the town. They're all alive. But," she paused, struggling for words, "they're not responding to external stimuli. Catatonic, but their vital signs suggest extreme neurological activity. Drugged? That's what we thought initially. But blood tests are coming back negative for all known substances. Dr. Mitchell is examining them now, but he's requesting additional specialists." Rodriguez followed Thompson to what had been Terlingua's old saloon, now converted into a makeshift medical facility. What he saw inside defied his 22 years of law enforcement experience. 43 people sat or lay in perfect geometric arrangements throughout the building. Their eyes were open but unblinking, their breathing synchronized to the point where the entire room seemed to pulse with a collective rhythm. Men, women, children, all ages and ethnicities, but all sharing the same expression of absolute tranquility. Dr. Mitchell approached with tablet displaying brain scan results. "Sheriff, these readings are unlike anything in medical literature. Their neural activity is off the charts, but it's not chaotic like a seizure. It's organized, purposeful, as if they're all participating in some kind of shared mental process." "Are they conscious?" That's the question. They don't respond to voice, touch, or even mild pain stimuli. But their brain scans suggest they're experiencing something incredibly complex and engaging. Agent Walsh was interviewing the tourist who'd discovered the scene. Martha Davis, a retired teacher from Dallas, had arrived early that morning for a photography expedition. "They were just sitting there when I drove into town," Davis explained, her hands shaking as she held a cup of coffee. "At first I thought it was some kind of performance art or meditation group. But when I spoke to them, tried to get their attention, it was like they couldn't see or hear me." Did you notice anything else unusual? The silence. Terlingua is usually full of bird calls, insect sounds, wind through the buildings. But this morning it was completely silent, like the whole area was holding its breath. Foster was examining the arrangement of the affected individuals more closely. This isn't random. They're positioned according to specific mathematical relationships. And look at this. He indicated scratches in the dirt floor that formed complex geometric patterns. They made these markings? That's what the evidence suggests. 43 people, all moving in coordination, creating a pattern that covers the entire floor of this building. Chen had been monitoring communications equipment. "Sheriff, we're getting radio interference similar to what we experienced at Blackstone Ranch. But this time it's stronger, and it's not random static." She adjusted the frequency controls, and suddenly the speakers filled with what sounded like human voices speaking in harmony. Not words in any recognizable language, but something that conveyed meaning on a deeper level than vocabulary. "Turn it off," Rodriguez ordered, but Chen shook her head. "Sir, I think this is how they're communicating." The affected individuals, they're connected somehow, sharing information or experiences through some kind of quantum entanglement. Before Rodriguez could respond, one of the catatonic individuals, a middle-aged man in hiking clothes, suddenly stood and walked toward their group. His movements were fluid but mechanical, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same harmonic qualities they'd heard through the radio. "Sheriff Rodriguez," the man said, though his lips barely moved. "We've been waiting for you to understand. The transformation is accelerating, and your interference is creating complications. Who are you? What have you done to these people? We are what these people are becoming. What humanity must become to survive what's coming. The old forms of consciousness are inadequate for the challenges ahead." Agent Walsh stepped forward. "What challenges?" The man's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Climate change will make the surface world uninhabitable within decades. Political conflicts will fragment civilization beyond repair. Technological development without spiritual evolution will lead to extinction. We offer an alternative. By turning people into, what? Zombies? By expanding consciousness beyond the limitations of individual existence. These people aren't lost. They're exploring realities you can't perceive, learning solutions to problems you can't imagine." Rodriguez drew his weapon, though he wasn't sure what good it would do. "Release them. Now." "They came willingly, Sheriff." Each one sought something: healing, purpose, escape from suffering. We provided what they truly needed, not what they thought they wanted. Around the room, the other affected individuals began to stir, their synchronized movements creating a hypnotic dance-like pattern. As they moved, the geometric markings on the floor began to glow with the same phosphorescent light Rodriguez had seen at Blackstone Ranch. "You need to leave," the speaking man continued. "This process cannot be interrupted safely. Forced disconnection at this stage would cause permanent psychological damage." Foster was already calling for evacuation. All personnel, withdraw to the perimeter immediately. This is not a negotiation. As they retreated from the building, Rodriguez could see the affected individuals through the windows. They had formed a perfect circle in the center of the room, their movements becoming more fluid and synchronized. The glow from the floor markings was growing brighter, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. "What happens now?" Thompson asked. Before anyone could answer, the building simply vanished. Not destroyed, not collapsed, it faded from existence like a mirage, taking all 43 individuals with it. Where the saloon had stood moments before, there was only empty desert marked by a perfect circle of fused sand. The silence that followed was broken by Chen's voice, barely a whisper. "Sheriff, the website. It's broadcasting a new message." She held up her tablet, showing the Desert Enlightenment site. Where there had been text about spiritual transformation, there was now a countdown timer and a simple message. Phase 2 begins at sunset. Those who seek evolution should gather at the marked coordinates. Rodriguez looked at his watch. 4:30 p.m. Sunset was less than 2 hours away. Coordinates appeared on the screen. A location in Big Bend National Park, in one of the most remote and dangerous sections of the Chihuahuan Desert. If people were being called there, they would face extreme heat, flash flood danger, and terrain that had claimed dozens of experienced hikers over the years. "We need to set up roadblocks," Rodriguez decided. "Anyone heading toward those coordinates gets turned back." "Sheriff," Walsh said grimly, "we've been monitoring social media. The website's message has been shared thousands of times in the past hour. We're looking at potentially hundreds of people converging on that location." Foster was coordinating with state and federal agencies. "I've got National Guard units mobilizing, but they won't reach the area until after dark. And if these people have the same abilities we saw at Terlingua, they can disappear at will," Rodriguez finished, "making traditional containment impossible." As they established a command post near the park entrance, reports began coming in from across Texas and neighboring states. Individuals were abandoning their vehicles at remote locations and walking into the desert, all heading toward the same coordinates. Some had been driving for hours, others had apparently been preparing for days. "It's not random," Chen observed, analyzing the incoming data. "These people have been selected and prepared. Look at the demographics: scientists, teachers, medical professionals, engineers. All people with knowledge and skills that would be valuable for building something." Building what? A new society. A post-human civilization that can survive in environments where current humans can't exist. The horror of it began to sink in. They weren't dealing with a cult or terrorist organization. They were witnessing the early stages of human evolution being artificially accelerated, guided by intelligence that understood humanity's limitations better than humans themselves. As the sun began to set over the desert, painting the landscape in shades of orange and red, Rodriguez realized they were about to witness something that would change the world forever. The question was whether they could document it without becoming part of it themselves. The convergence began at exactly 8:47 p.m. as the last light faded from the Big Bend horizon. Sheriff Rodriguez watched through night vision binoculars from a ridge overlooking the designated coordinates where an impossible scene was unfolding in the desert below. They came from all directions, individuals and small groups walking across terrain that should have been impassable in darkness. Some carried no lights, navigating the treacherous landscape with inhuman precision. Others seemed to glow with their own internal illumination, creating a constellation of moving lights across the desert floor. "I count at least 300 individuals," Agent Foster reported through his radio, "all converging on the same location with military precision." Rodriguez watched as the gathering crowd began forming geometric patterns in the sand. Not randomly, but with the same mathematical precision they'd seen at previous sites. The people moved like dancers, following choreography they'd rehearsed for years, creating intricate designs that became visible only from their elevated observation point. Chen, are you recording this? Yes, sir, but the equipment is acting strange. The video keeps distorting, and our GPS readings are fluctuating wildly. Dr. Mitchell, monitoring from the mobile command unit, reported even more disturbing findings. Sheriff, we're detecting massive electromagnetic anomalies. The readings suggest some kind of dimensional disturbance centered on that gathering. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see the crowd had formed a spiral pattern nearly a quarter-mile in diameter. At the center, a structure was materializing, not being built, but forming from the desert itself, as if reality was being reshaped by the collective will of the assembled people. That's impossible, Agent Walsh muttered, adjusting her own observation equipment. Solid matter doesn't just reorganize itself. But the evidence was undeniable. Where there had been empty desert, a crystalline formation was growing from the ground, reaching toward the star-filled sky like a natural formation that had taken millennia to form, but was completing itself in minutes. Rodriguez's radio crackled with reports from roadblock teams positioned throughout the region. Despite their efforts to intercept people heading toward the convergence, hundreds had somehow evaded detection. More disturbing were reports that some individuals had been seen walking through solid barriers, or simply vanishing when approached by law enforcement. "Sheriff," came Deputy Yang's voice from Roadblock Delta. "We had eyes on a group of 12 individuals heading your direction. They walked straight toward our position, and when we tried to stop them, they just kept walking. Right through our vehicles. Right through us. Like we weren't there." "Say again, Yang?" "I know how it sounds, sir." But they phased through solid matter. Jenkins tried to physically stop one of them, and his hands passed right through her. Then they all just faded away. Foster was coordinating with military units stationed at a safe distance. "Sheriff, the Air Force is reporting radar anomalies over the convergence site. Multiple objects that shouldn't be there, moving in patterns that defy known physics." Rodriguez refocused his binoculars on the gathering below. The crystalline structure had grown to nearly 100 feet in height, and the spiral of people had begun moving clockwise around it. As they walked, they began to sing, not with their voices, but with their entire beings, creating harmonics that resonated through the desert air. "Everyone's wearing ear protection, right?" Rodriguez asked, remembering warnings about psychological effects of certain frequencies. But the sound bypassed their ears entirely, resonating directly in their minds. Rodriguez felt his consciousness expanding, suddenly aware of perspectives beyond his own limited viewpoint. He could sense the thoughts and emotions of every person in the gathering below, experience their joy at transcending human limitations. "Sir," Chen's voice seemed to come from very far away, "your vitals are spiking. You need to look away from the gathering." Rodriguez forced himself to lower the binoculars, breaking the connection. The moment he stopped observing directly, his normal awareness returned with jarring suddenness. "Whatever's happening down there," he said, breathing heavily, "it's designed to recruit observers. Anyone who watches too long gets drawn in." Agent Walsh was experiencing similar effects. It's not just visual. The entire event is generating some kind of psychic field that makes participation seem irresistible. From their command post 3 miles away, Dr. Mitchell reported dramatic changes in local environmental readings. The temperature at ground zero is dropping rapidly, down 15 degrees in the past 10 minutes. But that's not the strangest part. The soil samples we collected earlier are showing molecular restructuring. The desert itself is being transformed. transformed into what? Something that can support life forms that couldn't survive in normal Earth environment. It's like they're terraforming a small section of the planet to be compatible with something else. Rodriguez realized they were witnessing the establishment of a beachhead, a foothold for entities or consciousness that couldn't normally exist in human reality. The 300 people below weren't just transforming themselves. They were transforming the Earth to accommodate their new state of being. "How far will the effect spread?" he asked. "If the current rate continues, the transformed zone will expand outward at approximately 1 mile per hour. Within a week, it could encompass most of West Texas." The implications were staggering. They weren't dealing with a localized phenomenon anymore, but the beginning of a fundamental change to the planet itself. Foster was already coordinating evacuation procedures. All civilian populations within a 50-mile radius need to be relocated immediately, and we need to establish a containment perimeter before this spreads beyond our ability to control. But as they watched, the gathering below began the final phase of their transformation. The crystalline structure pulsed with internal light, and the spiral of people began moving faster, their forms becoming increasingly translucent. "They're phasing out of our reality," Chen observed, her scientific training helping her process what defied conventional understanding. "Moving into a dimensional space where they can exist in their transformed state." Rodriguez watched as 300 people simply faded from existence, leaving behind only the crystalline structure and a perfect circle of transformed desert. The electromagnetic readings stabilized, but the change to the landscape was permanent. "They're not gone," Chen said quietly, studying her instruments. "The readings suggest they're still here, just existing in a different dimensional phase. Like a radio station we can no longer tune into." The crystalline structure continued to pulse with internal light, and Rodriguez realized it was some kind of beacon or communication device. Through it, the transformed individuals could maintain contact with both their original reality and whatever dimension they now inhabited. "Sheriff," Agent Walsh said urgently, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple sources. People are reporting dreams, visions, voices calling them to come here. This event isn't ending, it's just beginning the next phase." Rodriguez felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In a single night, they had witnessed the beginning of what could be the end of humanity as they knew it. The question now was whether they could find a way to contain it, communicate with it, or simply survive it. Over the following weeks, the transformed zone continued to expand, though at a slower rate than initially feared. The federal government established a containment perimeter and classified the entire incident under national security protocols. Official reports blamed the disappearances on a gas leak that caused mass hallucinations. But Rodriguez knew the truth. He had seen the future of human evolution, and it was both beautiful and terrifying. The people who had vanished weren't victims. They had chosen to become something beyond human limitations, something that could exist in realities normal humans couldn't perceive. The crystalline structure remained active, continuing to broadcast its calling signal across the electromagnetic spectrum. Every few weeks, new individuals would arrive at the perimeter, drawn by dreams and visions they couldn't resist. Most were turned away by security forces, but some found ways to reach the transformed zone, adding to whatever society was being built in that dimensional pocket. Rodriguez continued his duties as sheriff, but everything had changed. He knew that somewhere, in a space adjacent to normal reality, hundreds of transformed humans were building something unprecedented. They were preparing for a future where the current form of humanity might not survive, offering evolution to those willing to pay the price of leaving their old existence behind. The desert kept its secrets, as it always had. But now those secrets included the knowledge that human consciousness was more flexible than anyone had imagined, and that the next stage of evolution might require abandoning everything that made them recognizably human. Late at night, when the desert wind carried strange harmonics across the borderlands, Rodriguez sometimes wondered if they had made the right choice in trying to contain what they had witnessed. Perhaps the transformed were correct. Perhaps humanity needed to evolve to survive the challenges ahead. But he kept those thoughts to himself, maintaining his role as protector of normal human society, while secretly monitoring the ongoing changes in the deep desert. Because he knew that eventually everyone would have to choose: remain human and face an uncertain future, or join the transformed and become something else entirely. The choice was coming, whether humanity was ready for it or not. And when that time arrived, Sheriff Marcus Rodriguez would be there to help people make the most important decision in the history of consciousness itself. 6 months after the Big Bend Convergence, Rodriguez received a final transmission on his personal radio, a frequency that shouldn't have been able to reach him. The voice was familiar, yet changed, layered with harmonics that spoke to something deeper than words. "Sheriff Rodriguez," the voice said, and he recognized it as Dr. Amanda Torres, the archaeologist who had been among the first to disappear. "Thank you for witnessing our transformation. When humanity is ready to evolve, you'll know where to find us. Until then, we'll be watching from the spaces between realities, preparing for the day when choice becomes necessity." The transmission ended, leaving only static and the endless whisper of desert wind. Rodriguez looked out at the vast expanse of West Texas, knowing that beneath its familiar landscape, something new was growing, something that might be humanity's salvation or its replacement. Either way, the desert would endure, as it always had, keeping its newest and most profound secret in the crystalline heart of a transformed world.